Unemployed and Afraid acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this episode on and of the land where you, the listener, are tuning in from. We would like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and extend our respect to any First Nations, Aboriginal, and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today, acknowledging that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land.
Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid, a podcast that explores the messy middle of being out on your own and starting over with the people who've done it. I'm your host, Kim Curtin. Thank you for being here. Let's get into today's story of starting over. Welcome to another episode of Unemployed and Afraid, where we get to hear from inspiring change makers about their career journey, ups, downs, and the gloriously messy bits in the middle. What I love most about creating this podcast series is how real and vulnerable my guests are about their journeys, because there's so much more to the process of starting over and making change than the end result, which is often where we rush to. Have you done that yourself? Been tempted to rush to the end result of your change, that nice, safe place where you can explain to your friends and family and colleagues exactly what it is that you do, why you do it, and how qualified you are to do it? Honestly, why do we do this to ourselves? If you're anything like me, you'll look at the websites and pages of accomplished creatives in awe of their talent and creativity. But there's a lot that goes into that final product that we don't see, because everyone started somewhere. And as the saying goes, you should never judge someone's step 20 with your step 1. Dearna Bond is a photographer and a stylist that I am a huge fan of. It's pretty hard not to be. Her approach to getting started and learning skills as you go, trusting the process and never stopping that learning will leave you inspired to lean into whatever your creative heart desires. Now, before we get into today's chat, I wanted to quickly remind you about our Unemployed and Afraid Facebook community. We're just getting started over there on creating a safe place to continue the conversation about starting over, and I'd love you to join. Just search for Unemployed and Afraid on Facebook and click the Request to Join button. Over the coming months, we'll work together on creating more content, more conversations, and opportunities to feel more supported than ever on your career journey. All right, that's enough introing from me. Let's get into today's chat. Today, I'm chatting with freelance lifestyle photographer and stylist, Dearna Bond. Now, this isn't easy to convey in audio form, but you'll have to trust me when I say Dearna's images take you somewhere magical. She creates beautiful scenes that evoke a mood and tell a story like no other. And honestly, her food photography is off the charts amazing. Dearna has created for some incredible brands, including Connoisseur Ice Cream, Lark Whisky, Halo Top, Loving Earth, Royal Doulton, and for iconic accommodations such as Wow Song Shack and Captain's Rest. And she's most recently been on the road capturing beautiful Tasmanian moments for Tourism Australia. One short scroll of her Instagram page and you'll fall in love with her aesthetic and be able to see exactly why these incredible brands trust Dearna to create for them. And Dearna's career as a photographer happened almost by accident, with a humble beginning in food blogging and the camera set to auto. Wow, is the world very glad that you kept going. Dearna, welcome to Unemployed and Afraid.
Thank you, Kim. That was really lovely.
You're so welcome. I'll have to cut it out for you and send it over so you can keep it on your desk.
Yeah. Little positive reinforcement.
Yeah, your work is honestly incredible. I'm sure you hear that a lot, but it's so easy to fall in love with your images and they grab you and they jump out. So before we get into your epic career story, let's break the ice a little bit. I would love to know how your daughter Lou would describe you.
Well, so my daughter Lou has just turned 3. So the way that and she's obviously my daughter, so the way that she would describe me would probably be a bit different to other people. But she'd probably tell you that I'm a good singer, which I'm definitely, anybody else that knows me will tell you that I'm quite tone deaf, but she always asks me to sing. I do a great rendition of Baby Shark. So
oh no, that's going to be in my head now all day.
Oh, it's awful, isn't it? Yeah. But I think she would also say that I'm very loving and caring, patient as one can be with a toddler. And I think she'd also say that I'm on my phone way too much.
Relatable for most of us, I think. Do you get those alerts onto your phone that tell you your screen time each week?
I do, yeah. And I also have one set up now on Instagram. You can set so that once you've been on Instagram a certain amount of time, it will say, think about logging out now.
Oh, so I love that. I should use that.
I think it says stop scrolling now, but you can easily scroll through it. So
you just cancel, ignore, keep scrolling.
Yeah. Oh. I always say like, well, it's work. I use Instagram for promotion, but I'm so lax with posting these days that I'm not really sure that it is work. It's just kind of keeping up.
Yes, I can completely relate to that. So I can't wait to hear all about as well your beautiful page and how they got started and promoting your work on there. But before we do that, take me way, way, way back. Who were you before you picked up a camera?
Before I picked up a camera, it wasn't really like a straightforward journey to becoming a photographer. I had no idea what I wanted to do when I grew up, when I was a kid. One career aspiration was I lived in a really small rural town and I really loved going to the jewelers and buying presents and they'd gift wrap them. And I was like, that would be a cool job. But I mean, no clear career aspirations. So I went to high school, went to college, which in Tassie here, they're separate. So that I always knew I'd go to college. And then I did pre-tertiary subjects just because that's what they told me to do. And then I only ended up going to university because when college finished, that was what I'd met a great group of friends and they were all moving to Hobart to go to university. And I was like, that sounds like fun. Mm-hmm. So I went down, we got a house together and went to university and I studied arts. So I ended up majoring in sociology. And I had always had an interest in social justice, social inequalities. So that was an interest of mine. It wasn't necessarily a career progression. It was just out of all the things I could study that kind of spoke to me the most. And I ended up then going on to study criminology. So I did a postgrad course in criminology and then it was a master's by coursework, but I dropped out before the actual master's part. So I dropped out with a grad cert or grad dip because I got the travel bug and I wanted all my friends who were overseas doing the typical backpacking, living in the UK, and I wanted to do that too. So I spent 2 years over there. And then when I got back, I had lost all my contacts. There'd been a change of government while I was over there, and I'd been doing a little bit of work for Department of Justice through my major project for my postgrad, and all my contacts there had gone. They'd lost all their funding and that department had completely broken down. So I got a job at the university. I worked there casually while I was studying and I still had people I knew there. And then I just started out working in admin and then there were a lot of opportunities there, especially back then, for career progression and trying different things. And I ended up, after a few years of changing roles and that, ended up doing project work and working as a business analyst. And so I did that, I think all up, I did that for about 8 years. And then after COVID, they, lost a lot of money and they offered redundancies. And I was like, this is my cue. If I've ever got an opportunity to take the plunge, this is it. So that was at the end of, what year is it now? 2022?
I don't even know, but yeah, 2022. Yeah, it's a merge of 2020, basically.
Yeah. So it was at the end of 2020, I left my job at UTAS and became a full-time, part-time, because I have 2 days a week with my daughter, but that photography and styling became my sole career. So I've been doing that for a bit over a year now.
Wow.
So a bit of a roundabout way to get here. And obviously I didn't just leave my job as a business analyst and become a photographer. I was kind of plodding along a bit. You mentioned my food blogs. That was kind of how it started as a bit of a passion project. Yeah. And then ended up here.
I love that. And I'm going to ask you about your food blogging, but I have to ask first, does your criminology postgrad, if I'm getting that terminology correct, does that still come out in maybe some true crime podcast loving or any sort of crime content absorption?
Probably. I do. I'm quite partial to a true crime podcast, and I love a lot of the real kind of Scandi noir TV shows. We do watch a lot of those, so potentially.
It's nice to see where a uni degree can sometimes, come back in and sneak back into the love. So tell me all about your food blog. Were you doing this at the same time as working as a business analyst?
Yes. Yeah. So the university, like, was a great place to work. But as I said, it wasn't necessarily the career that I was like, yes, I want to work tertiary administration. So I just kind of ended up there, and my colleagues were always great. For the most part, I had really great managers and the environment was mostly good. So I was relatively happy there, but I always felt like there was something kind of missing, especially once I started doing the business analysis work that I was doing. It was always in like IT system type stuff, and a lot of it was project work, and some of the projects were quite fast paced and quite intense, and so there were definitely periods there where I was like, I really am not enjoying this, and I can't see myself doing this forever. But I didn't know what other options I had. I didn't have a clear like, oh, I'm really interested in this, maybe this could be a career. But I have always really enjoyed cooking and always really liked food. My mum's family's Italian, so when I was little, I used to go in and stay at my grandparents' house, and my grandfather had a typical Italian backyard. Like, it was all veggie gardens, a little bit of concrete, lots of veggie gardens, lots of tomatoes. He was in the garden all day, and then my nana would be in the kitchen making stuff from scratch. And so I used to love going in there on school holidays and doing that. And so, yeah, I was really interested in it, and I used to like chat with my friends a lot about cooking, and this is probably going back about 10 years or so, I guess, maybe even a bit longer. So it was before kind of probably not before MasterChef, but like, it wasn't nowadays like cooking and making sourdoughs and those kind of things from scratch. All that kind of thing is very popular, but back then it wasn't, and a lot of my friends weren't really all that interested. And one of my close friends actually worked at UTAS as well, so we used to spend quite a bit of time together. We'd go on walks at lunchtime, and we were going for a walk once, and I think he tells the story I was telling him about how to make porridge, which is probably true. I do like porridge, and how to get it just perfect. And he was like, who would be really interested in this story? Other people that like porridge. There's have you heard of a food blog? Maybe that's something that you could do. And then those people can hear your story.
Stop telling me about the porridge, lady. Go put it on the internet.
He said it in a very nice way, but I'd read food blogs, but it had never crossed my mind that you could just create one. And certainly back then, I think the only platform to do it was WordPress, and it was not very user friendly. I think it was fairly expensive. I had no idea about how I'd take photos of my food. I can't even remember if I had a smartphone back then. I don't think I did. I don't think I had a phone that took great photos, and I certainly didn't have a proper camera. And so it took me a few years before I actually took the plunge, but he definitely planted the seed. And the more I thought about it, and the more I'd read other food blogs, I know they get a lot of bad press these days, but it was, there weren't that many. And the ones that, it was like this really new, interesting thing where people, were really passionate about food, and you didn't have to be a chef, which is really, anything else you see would be like a cookbook or on TV where they were these really accomplished chefs. And it was nice just to see other home cooks being passionate about making stuff and trying different flavors. So I started a food blog, and as part of that, I had to learn how to take photos of my food, which was the second part of it once I got the food blog set up. And my food blog is still there. It's called To Her Core. I'm
going to look it up immediately after this.
It's just tohercore.com. I haven't published anything in years, but it is there. And if you scroll back to the very start, you'll see what my starting blocks were.
Wow, that must have been so intense at the time. We're so blessed now with platforms like Squarespace and sites that make building a website super, super easy. But I can imagine there were some days where you wanted to tear your hair out trying to figure out technically what was happening. Yeah,
it took a lot longer, even for something like to put in. I can't remember the name of it, but it was like a online like recipe platform. I don't know if it still exists. And they had a plugin that you could put on your site, and they'd run ads. It was basically like an ad plugin, and that would generate a bit of revenue. And I remember the setup for that took me about a month to get
Wow.
this like plugin set up, whereas now you can just quickly add a widget or whatever. It was very different. This is like back in, I think, 2013 that I started my blog. So it was going on, you know, close to 10 years ago now. So it was a while ago. Things have changed a lot in that time.
And so you're looking to take the photos of your food at this stage. What did you start using? Was it a professional camera or
so I'm pretty sure that when I decided to do the food blog that I went out and bought an entry-level DSLR. I don't think I ever did it with my phone or anything like that. I'm pretty sure that was my first thing. And I remember having the discussion with my boyfriend because I think it was like $800 for the body and lens, maybe $900, but a lot less than what my setup costs now. But at the time, that was a huge amount of money, especially for a hobby. So we discussed it at length and then, decided to take the plunge and do it. And I mean, similarly, like now there's lots of food photography courses and YouTube series and blogs and that. Back then there was nothing really, or nothing that was easy to find. And the stuff that was there, it was all very much geared towards very kind of commercial, you know, that real kind of like, not quite like Women's Weekly's 1980s cookbook photography, but it felt very dated. Like the editing was kind of like an orangey hue and the styling was like really obvious. It wasn't, anything that really interested me. So I got the camera and I just left all the settings on auto. And I would literally so if I was doing porridge, I would have a bowl of porridge. And if there was cinnamon on top, I'd just style 2 little cinnamon quills lying like across from each other in the foreground. But there you go. That's like, you know, but in doing that though, I knew that the images in my head were very different to the images I was creating, but I didn't know how to get what was in my head out. And it took quite a few years to get to the point where I was really happy with what I was producing, partially a product of the times in that there wasn't a lot of resources available. I didn't know any photographers in Hobart. I hadn't even heard of any food photographers here, but it slowly started to become a bit of a thing and people would publish like a post on a blog about it, or I eventually came across a course in Sydney it was that taught about how to shoot in manual. So I went and did that. It was lifestyle photography, not food, but it was still giving me part of the tools that I needed. And so it was a bit of a process to learn firstly how to shoot in manual and then how to style, understanding light, which was a huge part of photography, and then putting all those together. So it was a long learning curve, but I mean, I'm a photographer now, so
a very worthy long learning curve. And do you remember the first image that you were able to translate from what was happening in your mind's eye to the image you were seeing on the camera on the computer?
I don't remember specifically the first image, but I do remember back then. We've renovated our house now, but it's like an old workers' cottage and it had a little like lean-to kitchen area built on the back in the 70s, I think. And that was where I used to do all my photography, and the light was awful, but I didn't understand light at the time. But because that was my kitchen, that's just where I used to shoot. And so I think, I don't know if I read it or if one of the courses that I did told it to me, but it was like, look for better light in the house. And I realized that in the dining room, the light was a lot better. And we had this nice old wooden table. And so it was around the time that I started shooting next to this nice window on this nicer table. And I started to get nice light. And then from there, it was, you know, trial and error to get the composition and the styling of the shot right. But it was definitely a journey. I never really had an aha kind of moment, but there were steps that I took along the way where things just really started to slot into place. And it started to become a bit easier to be able to do what I want or get the results that I want, I guess.
And who was there, or you may not be able to say the brand, but what was the experience like to have an approach about being a photographer for somebody else other than your food blog?
It was very exciting, but it was incredibly nerve-wracking. I was very, very worried that I wouldn't be able to pull it off, although I still feel like that with some of my shoots today. So I don't know that feeling.
I don't think it ever goes anywhere, no matter what it
goes. But I was very worried, and it was it was a combination as well of, I wasn't sure if my photography was up to scratch, but I also had no idea how to charge. And I contacted a friend of a friend, did photography on the side. And so I asked my mutual friend, and she contacted him, and he was like, oh, I'll probably tell her to charge $60 an hour. And I was like, okay. And I literally just charged $60 for the time that I was shooting. And then like I took ages to edit as well. And I was like, well, I can't charge them all the time it took me. So I think I charged them like $180 or something for a job that all up took me over a day to do.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like there were a lot of things like that along the way that were definitely learning experiences, but it was very exciting to get to be asked for. And it was like a restaurant that in Hobart was the first job I ever shot for. It was a restaurant that I really liked. And so that, yeah, it was very humbling, but very nerve-wracking.
I can imagine.
But I'm pretty sure they were really happy with my photos. They kept getting me back, and I still shoot for them to this day. So
that's a good sign. Yes.
That's a good sign. Yeah.
Did they come through? Were you advertising as a photographer at this stage? Or
No. And a lot of my work in Hobart has always come through word of mouth. But I did a workshop, like I taught a photography and styling workshop with a friend that was also interested in it, 2 novices teaching a bunch of other novices. And one of the restaurant owner's friends came along, and so she recommended me, and so that's how I got the job.
That's so brilliant. I love that for so many reasons, because you did spend a lot of time, it sounds like, developing that skill set and trial and error and going through the process to then get to the stage to be able to promote yourself as a teacher who can get other people on the path there as well. And then to have that person recognize your photographer. But I can see the whole time you're sort of like playing catch up with, you're a photographer, girl. Like, you know what you're doing.
Yeah. And I think also because it wasn't my full-time job and I didn't have any proper training, I was largely self-taught. It's hard these days, I think, to be, fully self-taught in anything, because you've got all these online courses and resources, but then even just, looking through Instagram and visually seeing something and thinking, oh, that's a really interesting use of light. I'm going to see if I can like replicate that or incorporate that, or, oh, I wonder how they did that. So I think most people these days are self-taught only to an extent, because it's very hard to be really original these days. But and definitely early on I felt like a bit of a fraud. I definitely had a lot of imposter syndrome early on, even like in my Instagram bio for years. Even after I started getting photography work, I would still only ever have food blogger. I think that's what it said. It was something, I didn't put photographer in there for ages. It was like a very vague, I think maybe it said food blogger or food photos, or I didn't want to like call myself something that I wasn't sure that I was.
Wow, it's so relatable. I mean, that imposter syndrome that sneaks up, knowing how to call yourself when you're, delving into this creative
when you're
space.
starting out. Yeah, it is really hard. And there isn't, for most people, I don't think there isn't a set moment where you switch over from being a creative that's just dabbling a bit because you're interested to actually being a photographer or a, ceramicist or whatever it is, that a painter, whatever it is that you're trying to get to. So
I think we all think that we have to have the degree or
the official
that official, exactly, the doctor of whatever creative outlet that we have to be able to say, yes, I feel like I can prove myself as this now. But so often our pathways are contributing. There would have been so many things even from your travels and from your studies that would have contributed to in the way you work and the way that your aesthetic was built and the things that go into making you the person you are today. But I think a lot of us can relate to that fear of calling ourselves whatever that is. Yeah. But honestly, as I said in my intro, the world is super grateful that you kept going and you got it off you got it off auto and kept going. And how did you go about putting your first images out there? Did you ever feel nervous putting your photos out there for other people to comment on?
Oh yeah, 100%. I still do to an extent now. Sometimes I'll like think, yes, that photo's so good, and I'll put it on Instagram, and then I'll look at it in my feed and I'll be like, is it? Or it won't get much traction, which it's so hard to know, with the algorithm and everything, it's so hard to get traction on posts these days anyway, that I'm not as concerned with how things perform on Instagram these days. But definitely for a while back there, like if I put something up and it didn't perform well, I'd be like, oh, and I'd start doubting myself if I'd be like, well, is that a good photo? Should I keep doing photos like that? Was it not a great dish? Should I stop? All these questions kind of go around. And I think the other thing is, for a lot of creatives, we all work very siloed. Like we don't have a lot of people that we can easily bounce things off or get feedback from. And especially a lot of the time on Instagram, it's a very friendly, encouraging, supportive community of other creatives that most people tend to find. It's certainly been my experience and most other people's that I speak, to get that like constructive criticism that you sometimes really need to grow. It's hard to find someone that can give you that.
Yeah, I think I can definitely relate to that. It's you can get stuck a little bit in that echo chamber or the supportive, happy place, which is great, and wonderful. But yes, getting to that next level. I mean, you took a very big next level plunge. So taking a full-time job that you had alongside your freelance, and then taking this redundancy to then go out and go full-time into photography freelancing. That must have been pretty scary in the moment.
Yeah, it was kind of, it felt right though. So a few things had happened that led to that. So I had my daughter at the start of 2019. Prior to that, I think that the year or two prior to that, I dropped down to 4 days a week in my job. And so I had 1 day a week for photography. And then after I had my daughter, I took a year off. I was lucky that the university had amazing maternal leave, maternity maternity leave. I was like, hold on, that doesn't sound right. Maternity leave arrangements. So I was able to take a full year off. And during that time, I actually got, I'm not doing as much food photography these days, but back then that was the main thing that I was photographing. And I was getting a lot of work coming in, completely coincidental, that I could do at home. So Lou was a pretty good baby. She slept a reasonable amount, and I still had a few hours a day that I could do things, and so it was really nice to have those little jobs. But what it meant was that my photography business picked up. So after my year was up and I went back to UTAS, I only went back 2 days a week. So I was working 3 days, 1 day photography, 2 days at UTAS. And I mentioned I was doing lots of project work, but 2 days a week isn't really enough to be on a big, fast-moving project. So the work that I was being given wasn't really all that exciting, and I really, really wasn't enjoying it. And then the pandemic hit. So I was only back at work. And I found, this is kind of an aside, but one of the things I wasn't expecting after having a baby was how isolating it would be. Like, you spend a lot of time at home. And I kind of, before I had her, I would, like when I was pregnant, I would see all these people, like 2 young mums pushing their babies in prams around. We live in like a really nice little neighborhood, fairly central Hobart, and lots of little cafes, and I was like, oh, I can't wait to do that. But none of my friends, close friends, had baby, or the one that did have, she also had a toddler, so she couldn't go to a cafe. And I had mother's group, but the girls were really lovely that I met there, but it wasn't what I had in my head. So I was really, really looking forward to getting back to work. I wasn't necessarily looking forward to getting back to work itself, because I'd been doing photography work the whole way through, but just seeing people, and I got along really well with my colleagues. I was really looking forward to that. And so I was back in the office for 5 weeks. So 2 of those I was off on sick leave because Lee went to childcare and got sick. Of course. As it happens. But yeah, I was back 5 weeks when they sent us home, initially just as a trial while they were seeing what was happening with, this whole COVID thing. And then that ended up dragging on for over a year. I wasn't there that whole time. Yeah. And so I went back just to being at home by myself all day again without the baby. But yeah, I really started to not enjoy that job. And then they got hit really hard by the pandemic, and they offered voluntary redundancies. And I was like, this is, I'm not enjoying it. My photography business is picking up. It's, I was very, very fortunate that everything kind of aligned, and that I was able to take that plunge with a bit of money behind me as well from my redundancy, because a lot of people, that obviously isn't the case. They just have to dive off the deep end and hope that things work out. So I was very lucky that I had a bit of cushioning behind me.
Yeah, that is good timing. It feels like it is divine timing in
one
way.
It really, really did. And it's funny because prior to that, and I think a big part of it as well is my headspace, but I would see all these other amazing opportunities that other people would get in the photography or creative space online. And I would, be like, aren't these things happening to me? Like, these people are so lucky. Some things are luck, but I do think that things happen for a reason. And I think that, not that the pandemic happened for a reason, but, I think that these things, they lined up whether or not there was a reason. But I think that it happened at a perfect time for me, the fact that I was getting this work and all of the things kind of added together and then allowed me to put more time in. So then I did start getting these extra opportunities. And I think that you obviously have to work for stuff as well, which is a huge part of it. But yeah, it was quite a fortuitous time. And it's just, it's gone really well since.
That's so brilliant. So, but just bringing us back in to that headspace, going out and freelancing, the opportunities start to come in. You're there doing the do every day. Was there any tough learnings that started to come through at that time once you were full on into it?
Yeah, I think like one of the first big things. So as I said, I was really busy that year on maternity leave, fairly busy considering, like with work, the amount of time that I did have available. One of them happened fairly early on. So yeah, I was pretty comfortable taking the redundancy and leaving that career and that part of my working life. And I had quite a few jobs lined up. I'd had quite a few really good opportunities that could potentially lead to other work, which, word of mouth in this industry is so important. And so I was feeling really good. And then about 3 months into it, work started to quieten down. And I went through a period of 2 months where I had absolutely no work coming in. I didn't even have any inquiries. And I was like, shit, is this it? And I was like, because I'd never contacted anyone. I'd always just let work come to me organically. And I think that's another part on like what I just touched on, that I just felt like everyone was being handed these opportunities and they weren't. Like, there's so much work for everyone that goes on behind the scenes. There's so much that you don't see. And I was like, okay, this is it. One of the things I really wanted to do as well was do more learning. There were a few areas that I knew I wasn't very strong in, things like shooting with artificial lighting and some of my post-production stuff. Like, I'm pretty good with Lightroom, but Photoshop, not amazing. And I was like, right, this is the time now to, one, start doing these things that I've been putting off, and also to take the plunge and start to contact some businesses that I want to work with, rather than just waiting for people to come to me and hoping that it's a great fit. Yeah, so I reached out and I contacted a few businesses. None of that led to anything, but it was a really good exercise, because it was a very big thing for me personally. As we talked about before, I was really owning then that I was a photographer and that I was deserving to be paid and deserving of their time to even approach them and consider me and have those discussions, which prior to that, I still definitely had a lot of that imposter syndrome. So even though I reached out to 3 companies I wanted to work with, and they were all really nice, but it didn't lead to any work. But it was definitely a good experience for me. But yeah, so I enrolled in an online course on Photoshop and artificial lighting. I also enrolled in another one on advanced styling, and that was a year ago now, and I still haven't even looked at it. But the other 2 I have. But yeah, then I was really lucky that work did slowly start to come in. And I think too, having more time to be able to, not that I would rush things at all before, but it was a bit of a juggle, working a full-time job and then trying just to fit photography in around it. So it allowed me, having that as my sole focus, it really allowed me to kind of structure things a little bit better and, to give myself the time I needed to be able to do jobs at the level that I was happy, putting my name to. So yeah, there's definitely been a lot of learnings along the way though. There's definitely been a few times where I've been like, is this taking the redundancy from the university was the correct decision for me, but I did doubt whether is this going to be a sustainable job for me, long term at that time.
Well, I hope that you're charging a bit more than $60 an hour now for your incredible work.
I have changed my rate structure since then, yes.
Good.
I think it would be very, very hard to live off $60 an hour, because obviously when you run a small business you lose, like I think last financial year I lost 70 cents in the dollar, so you need to be charging enough so that you can cover all of your costs and your insurances and everything like that. There's a lot to it, so
yeah, and so much to learn. Even figuring out what insurances to have and products that you need and the courses that you need to do. There's just so much investigation into the field.
There is so much. And I think one of the hard things as well is there are a lot of avenues specifically for this, but I'm sure that this applies across a lot of things. And it's kind of hard to know if you're making the right decision to lead you where you want to go, especially if you're not really sure where you want to go. Like it's kind of, it's a hard thing to kind of figure out, but I think I am a lot more trusting in myself these days though. And I know when things feel good and when they don't. And I think that's a better fit. And I think part of that as well is that I'm a bit more established now. I'm a bit more experienced, whereas initially everything just felt scary and daunting and like it was potentially the wrong decision. So
I think it's something called decision fatigue, and everything is so big, even the smallest decisions, what job do I take to, what provider do I go with, and do I put an email signature on my emails, and
all the things,
every single thing. Was there ever a job that you just knew wasn't the right fit that you either walked away from or went ahead with and regretted?
A few,
We don't have to talk about exactly what they are, don't worry.
No, I won't be mentioning any names. There were definitely a few, especially earlier on. And then again, after I left my job and I was like, well, this is my sole income, so I can't just choose jobs. Obviously I've got a young family and a mortgage, so I can't just choose jobs based on that, I love this one. So there were some that perhaps didn't feel right, but I do think I am getting better at managing. I think a big thing, sometimes you occasionally, but very rarely, if I come across someone that's just not a nice person or not good to work with, it's more often than not is managing expectations. A lot of people don't understand what goes into it, and that's not just what I do. I think that's the same with a lot. Even I remember you telling me when we caught up for coffee when I was up the coast a while back about the process of making all of your ceramics and how much time and effort goes into that, and which was really mind-blowing. Not that I thought it was super quick, but there's so much to it, and the waiting for drying, and there's a lot that goes into everything. So, for me, I think now I'm a lot better at, if someone comes wanting these specific things, I'm a lot better at relaying, okay, well, if we do it this way, it could potentially be this long and cost this much. Here are some options that we could do it in, to work towards a budget or whatever that may be. I think that's helped. And a lot of that is just experiencing and being more aware of how I work and dealing with different clients, and having that experience has definitely helped.
Yeah, it's so true. There's so many times where it's very tempting to undervalue the work, to undersell ourselves, because you feel quite privileged to be able to do the work that you love and the creativity that goes into it. And so, speaking for myself, sometimes I almost feel bad for, needing to charge exactly what it actually costs to be able to also then make it a career. It's a real challenge. It's a challenge that I didn't quite expect to encounter through the process. And
sometimes I'll get, like, I had a job the other day and it was taking photos in an area outside of Hobart, and I got to take some friends along and they provided food and drink, and I was like, I feel really bad like charging for this, because this is like such a fun day out, obviously I was, every time my friends would go to eat, I'd be like, oh, don't eat that bit, I need to photograph it, just move your hand. So it wasn't like it was work, but it was it was one of those really great opportunities where you get to work with friends. And but I think the other thing as well is a lot of my work used to come through Instagram, and you'd make friends with people. And so I think that's another hard thing is, a lot of, at the moment, of the clients that I'm working with are a bit bigger, and so I don't have that personable connection, but for a long time work would come through Instagram, and it would often be with people that I had a bit of a relationship with, And I'm like, well, I don't feel like I can charge you, or, you know, and that's really hard because you want to do right by people, but you also need to do right by yourself.
It's so true. I have a real problem with giving away ceramics, and my partner pulls me up on every time. It's like, why do you keep giving this stuff away? It's so important. But yeah, you do find those connections and those. It's a tempting space to start to reduce costs and do those things. It's a hard one to get through, but I think, you know, we take these jobs on sometimes. You know, I've certainly taken on a few things where I've thought this is a great opportunity, it could lead to something else, you know, whether it be in the food space or something otherwise. And you take a fee that you know isn't right, you know is a bit below, or well and truly below, but you take it. And then there's that tough bit in the middle. We're like, I know I shouldn't be doing this, but here I am.
I've committed to it. I have to do it.
We just have to get through those and take those learnings on board. And is there a dream gig that you have in mind now that you're fully up and running, you're full time, the jobs are starting to come through? Is there something that you'd love to do?
So there's one I'm in discussion with at the moment that I have my fingers crossed goes ahead. But other than that, it is not so much like dream clients, but it's more working. I would really just love to work with more people and more clients that kind of, you know, tick all the boxes, you know, someone that's really great to work with and that's very professional. I've noticed that, you know, some people are very personable, but they're not that great at the professional side of things, which is then, you know, can lead to, you know, some difficult conversations, and constantly asking, oh, okay, now can you just do this? And can you just do this little bit? And, you know, those kind of things. And I mean, that does come up sometimes and it's fine, but a lot of it can kind of be alleviated if there's a clear plan at the start, I guess. So yeah, someone that, you know, is really personable and professional and great to work with, which again, most people are, really great subject matter, whether it be an amazing food product or a really beautiful Airbnb. I get a lot of Airbnb photography and I love doing the Airbnb side of things, or, you know, any kind of lifestyle thing. I also really like, you know, something where I can put people in there and have it a bit more intimate, a bit relatable, and then also something that has, I guess, the budget and flexibility to be able to get really good content. So often if it might be hiring studio space or shooting outdoors, having the flexibility that we can wait for really good light conditions to get an amazing golden hour or something like that. Like a lot of the jobs that I get are just, well, it has to be done here and now kind of thing. And I understand that, like photography is an expensive gig and a lot of the big productions have so many other facets tied to it that you just have to do what you can do. But I think something that kind of ticked all the boxes would be amazing. And I do have quite a few of those at the moment, but yeah, to get more of that work that's, you know, great people, great subject matter that I can produce really great imagery for, that I absolutely love, would just make me smile.
Your images, honestly, I mean, I know I carry on about it a lot. I'm often in your DMs being like, are you serious? This is ridiculous. But they really are so beautiful. You know, the connoisseur moments always just get me, the drips of the chocolate.
And make you want to go out and buy an ice cream.
Oh, it really does. It makes me just want to consume.
Doing my job well then.
Yeah. Exactly. So, you know, more of you doing what you're doing is just incredible. You really have a unique aesthetic in what can be a bit of a sea of same. You really do stand out.
Oh,
so
thank you. That's really, really lovely.
Oh, they're just going to come through thick and fast. Have you ever thought about going into videography as well as an extension, or learning that side?
Well, so I have the camera that I upgraded, well, a little over when I left my job, I upgraded my camera to a mirrorless system, and that camera has a really good video functionality. I have done one or two little videos. It is a bit of a learning curve, but I do have a few jobs in the wings that have a little bit of video content, so we'll see. Yeah, I do. I think the other thing is, like, in terms of moving forward, I think I used to try really hard to match other people's style and output and be competitive. And I've realized that that's not really doing me any favors, and that I need to just stick with the style that I have, because it's always nice to try other things. And it is a really good learning experience shooting in a different style. But ultimately, to get the work that I want to get, that's the kind of content that I need to keep producing. And doing a really big flashy video isn't something that really appeals to me. But with the way that Instagram's going and Snapchat and TikTok, I'm not actually on those, but showing my age. But you know, like the little snippets of videos that can quickly convey a little bit of like feeling and stuff. I think there's definitely a moment in that, and I think people are kind of slowly moving towards that and wanting a bit of that without it being this really big production. So I would like to get into more of that kind of thing. It's quite exciting to me. So
I can just imagine the learning curve is just constant. I mean, you're inspiring me today. I've said it to you before, but I'll say it again. The next workshop you do, I will be your first customer. Because you do produce incredible work, but I can see just how much learning there is that goes into it. So, you know, it's just about getting started, I think, you know, anywhere, and getting that camera off auto and trying and failing and not worrying about that end result so much, and just seeing what comes into it. And I will make sure that I have your Instagram handle and your website in the show notes for listeners to go and have a look at your moments, because I said in audio form, I cannot convey how beautiful your work is. But other than those, clicking on those, following along those, is there anything else the listener and I can do to support you on your creative journey?
Unless my ideal client is listening. I think just, following along is always really nice. A little bit of love on an Instagram post is always really appreciated. It's nice to know that people take the time, especially if, you know, creatives definitely appreciate, you know, especially if an image has really spoken to you. But a little bit of love, some positive vibes is always a nice thing.
It's, I mean, I bang on about this a lot, but the power of a comment or a share, a DM, I mean, not just because of this algorithm we have to deal with these days in order to reach our audiences and reach new people. But it just goes such a long way, you know, sharing an image that you like to your page, or, you know, just saying why you like something. It's, you know, we move through so quickly and consume all the content that's out there. It's, whenever we can take just a few minutes to drop a little extra love, God, it goes a long way. So I hear you 100%. I'm sure you're going to get lots of likes after this, and I'll probably make sure that I share some of those chocolate dripping photos and fabulous images as well on the Unemployed and Afraid page. But Dearna, it was just so lovely to speak with you today and to hear about your journey into this world of photography. Congratulations, because you have crafted a beautiful corner of the internet and a beautiful career, and I can't wait to see where it goes next. So thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was nowhere near as nerve-wracking as what I was anticipating, so I'm glad it's over. No.
I hear you. I've said it before, I say it again. No matter how many podcasts I record to, I'm always a little sweaty. You know, the scariness never goes away when we're doing new things and putting ourselves out there. No,
that's so true. So true.
But we show up anyway, right? Sweaty bits and all.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for listening to Unemployed and Afraid, the stories of starting over with your host, me, Kim Curtin. If you liked the episode and are keen to hear more, please hit the follow button and leave a review. And let's keep the conversation going on Instagram @unemployedandafraid, where there's more goodies and links to today's show notes. See you there.